Hello everyone and welcome back to Newegg TV. I'm here once again with JJ from ASUS. How's it going, JJ?
I'm doing all right, thanks for asking.
Fantastic, I'm doing great too. And we are forging right ahead with all of the motherboard videos that we're talking about today. We're talking about the new ASUS Z97 series of motherboards. Today's video is all about the TUF series, or TUF, the Ultimate Force. And to that end, we actually have two Sabertooth boards here that are full-size ATX boards. I also want to point out, just before we get into everything, that there's also a micro ATX TUF series board, the Z97 Griffin. We don't have that here to show you guys right now, but it will be available at launch, so you can check that out. It'll be available on Newegg.com. And
for many of the features and functions that we'll discuss, they'll be cross-platform consistent. So, you know, between the micro ATX to the ATX, you'll pretty much see the same thing. Of course, specification-wise, there'll be some difference. So that's where, you know, the Newegg spec sheet and the compare table is your friend. So if you see that one has, you know, more USB ports or SATA ports or something along those lines, that's pretty self-explanatory. But a lot of what we talk about from the design and the feature functionality standpoint will be consistent between the boards. And
one of the hallmarks, or the more recent hallmarks of the TUF series, is the thermal armor, as you can see over here on the Sabertooth board on my left. The Griffin also has a thermal armor kit that you can purchase separately from the board and add on to it. But one other quick point to make is that if you have an old Griffin thermal armor kit, it is forward compatible with the new Z97 Griffin as well.
That's correct, so you can utilize it.
All right, cool. So we have two of these. Let's start off with the Mark I over here and talk a little bit about that. Now, TUF series is designed for long-term stability. It's one of the only, or pretty much the only ASUS motherboard series that has a 5-year warranty as opposed to the 3-year warranty that you get with the mainstream and the ROG boards. High level quality of components. Apart from that, what are the other emphases in the TUF series, JJ?
So just one quick clarification point. This is actually the Mark II.
Mark II. I'm sorry. That's the Mark II, and that's the Mark I.
That's the Mark I.
Had those switched.
So yeah, like you just talked about it, you know, the TUF is really kind of focused for users that we tend to focus in at saying that look for a longer term build. So usually 3 to 5 years in terms of their life cycle build. They tend to usually want to have a high performance system, but they tend to want to run stock. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that TUF can't adequately overclock with the best of any of our boards, whether it's mainstream, whether it's WS, whether it's ROG. They'll all overclock the same. And they're definitely built from the ground up to be able to ensure great stability, great reliability. But kind of the focus market that we have is that where mainstream kind of serves any type of usage model, whether it's gaming, productivity, content creation, you know, multimedia usage. TUF is very much actually in that same camp where we kind of target it towards any type of usage model. It just tends to be that the user has a very high degree of focus in terms of a longer lifespan. They're looking for more validation and reliability to help feel confident in that system in the long term, as well as they have a specific focus on cooling and monitoring technologies that we've gone ahead and incorporated into the board, and of course, you know, helping to reinforce those aspects of reliability and stability. Of course, are the improved components that we've talked about, as well as the TUF validation process, which actually may even be more important than just the improved components, because that actually, you know, we've talked about this in the past with the TUF board. You know, just because we have TUF components like the TUF chokes or the TUF capacitors, the TUF MOSFETs, that doesn't really mean anything to a degree, because you can have an individual component, but ultimately what's most important is how that component performs on the board once it's been integrated. You know, we've given the example before, you can buy a fantastic Brembo brake, but you could put it on, you know, a Ford Pinto, and it wouldn't really matter, right? It's not going to somehow all of a sudden take that car into a whole nother class of performance.
Doesn't make it faster?
No, it wouldn't necessarily make it faster. So that's kind of what we mean in terms of that when we put the TUF components, that's really only part of the process. For sure, it's helping to elevate the overall caliber and the quality of the board, but it's really going to be in that design and validation process that we go through that helps to ensure that we have this board that's meeting the criteria of stability and reliability for us. But in terms of the kind of the improved feature sets compared to our channel series, where the biggest differentiations are going to be is in the thermal radar. So of course that's that onboard set of sensors that gives us advanced thermal monitoring across the entire motherboard. With those advanced thermal sensors, that can work in conjunction with the thermal radar suite, which is part of AI Suite, to give you advanced cooling and monitoring functionality for the board. Now, an important part that ties into that is that we have actually a specialized IC. If we take a look over here in this corner, you're going to see a little IC that says TUF on it. So this is the TUF ICE microcontroller. So the Tough Ice microcontroller actually is independent of the Super I/O controller, which does your normal kind of monitoring as well as fan control functionality. And this gives us even more advanced fan control to be able to actually respond more actually control headers dynamically at the same time, as well as from a monitoring perspective have extremely low latency. And extremely highly accurate polling times. The reason why this is important is sometimes as you heavily load the system, the Super I/O controller can take longer to sometimes provide readings, and sometimes the readings can be slightly inaccurate, just because there's a lot of resources that are occurring at one time, and the Super I/O controller can essentially become slightly overwhelmed. Okay. But with that Tough IC, we essentially can have a dedicated microcontroller that's designated for that purpose. So it helps to go ahead and give us that best, like I said, control and monitoring flexibility for the motherboard. And speaking, of course, on control, one of the biggest things that we've improved for this generation is the Fan Expert 3 fan control functionality. Okay. Now, Tough has always had a very advanced form of fan control where we've been able to link in the actual temperature inputs to those different headers, but for this generation, we've really kind of brought it full circle, and we've extended on what we've done on the other motherboards and really pushed it further. So if we talked about on mainstream series where you, let's say, have, you know, chassis fan header right here, let's say this chassis fan header 3, or this chassis fan header down here, or this one, you could on mainstream series have maybe two or potentially 3 other inputs outside of the CPU. But with Tough, you can map to any of the 12 sensors on the entire motherboard. Okay. So you have a huge degree of flexibility. So where you could, let's say you have, you know, these chassis fans down here respond to the VGA sensors. So the moment those heat up, maybe those are linked into back fans, right, that you have, or maybe side intake fans that are going to blow air directly on top of the GPUs. So the moment that gets hotter in that section, you're automatically going to have those fans be able to provide to you an increase in temperature, where normally those might not react as aggressively where if they were linked into the CPU, because you already might have a really good CPU cooling solution that keeps the CPU cool. So those chassis fans don't really actually respond or kink up that much. Now, of course, you could manually compensate for this with our fan controls in the past because every single header offered manual fan control. But here, you can now really make sure that the actual response pattern is really indicative of where you want it to be in relation to the temperature. In addition to that, on let's say the Mark I board, you're even going to get more granularity as there'll be actually multiple temperature input sensors in addition to those 12 on board that you can plug into to map anywhere you want, whether it's the back of the GPU, maybe it's on a certain part of the chassis, maybe it's on part of your storage array, so you get a lot more flexibility.
Now I'm also noticing that you have what is known in the ROG series as the red line separation, but have you guys done a little bit more work on the audio with this series of boards?
So we have. We've actually brought in a kind of the isolated audio design that we have on our mainstream series. So with that, we've gone ahead and fully implemented the isolated audio path, and we've gone ahead and put on an operational amplifier. It does not carry the audio grade capacitors that we have on, let's say, the mainstream series of motherboards or on the ROG series, but part of that is done from the same way that we've improved the sound design on our WS, but we didn't use audio grade capacitors to be able to maintain that focus of having every component be in that same level of reliability. As audio capacitors, their electrolytic composition isn't as extensive as a polymer-based capacitor to be able to meet the certification of all the caps being 10K rated, as that's one of the feature points for the Tough series of boards. That's the reason why they don't have that. But otherwise, you still get that isolated audio path, you get the operational amplifier, and you also get that specially programmed DTS suite. What we've done is we've gone ahead and programmed certain presets so that when you plug in, let's say, their in-ear monitors, over-the-ear headphones, or desktop speakers, it will automatically equalize a preset for that type of playback device, as well as you also having the option to go into the DTS suite to auto-enable improved presets for either music, movies, or games. So you definitely get improved sound as a focus on the Sabertooth model. Now, moving back to one last point on the fan control functionality is going to be, though, that in addition to having those multiple temperature inputs, we also introduced the ability to have full control output signaling for either DC or for PWM. So right here, of course, we have our PWM splitter cable, and the great thing about this is that for you guys that are running, you know, much larger chassis where you might have like 7, 8, 9, 10 fans, you have the ability that you can go ahead and plug in this fan splitter into one of the chassis fan headers, set it to PWM, and then attach, you know, 2 or 3 other chassis fans, and have those all be controlled with that same output control signal. So this is a really advanced level of control. If you consider everything that you're getting here in terms of fan control functionality, it's pretty extensive. And of course, to have all those options available not only in the UEFI, but also in the operating system is extremely impressive. And keep in mind that we also offer our fan calibration within the UEFI environment, as well as updating the fan control functionality to not just have manual definable parameters, but even a graphical tuning option inside the UEFI for this generation.
Okay, and just a quick point of clarification, because I've worked with several Sabertooth boards in the past, and I actually get questions, or I have received questions in the past when it comes to the auto-tuning features that are more a hallmark of the mainstream series of boards.
Yes.
Now, the Fan Expert 3 is integrated into these two boards here, as well as the Griffin, but not necessarily automatic overclocking functions.
That's correct. Okay. So in terms of automatic overclocking, because the focus is on tough, more at stock operation and long term, of course you can manually overclock the board just as well as any mainstream or ROG series board, but from auto overclocking, the main options you're going to have available will be in the UEFI. Now in the UEFI, we do have some pretty advanced options. For this generation, we've incorporated an entirely new OC Wizard, which will allow you to select presets based on your cooling type. So you can pick either a standard box retail cooling solution, a tower heatsink, or a closed loop water cooling solution.
Oh, nice.
And based on that selection, it will automatically set to a profile overclock. So you do have options in terms of automatically overclocking it, but it won't be anywhere near as advanced as the full real-time auto overclocking that we do offer on the mainstream series of motherboards. Okay. So if you're somebody that wants that very advanced level simplicity, that is still something that we're only offering on our mainstream series. That being said, we are listening to your guys' feedback, and we are hoping to maybe introduce automatic overclocking functions like auto-tuning into our Sabertooth, as well as into our ROG series of motherboards.
Excellent. So apart from all of the points that we've talked about so far, we also have M.2 support with these newest series of motherboards available directly via the Z97 chipset. And is that integrated here as well?
So in terms of this board, what you're going to see for the storage connectivity is first going to be down in this section, which is going to be the normal PCH right here, which is going to be the PCH connectivity. But in terms of the M.2 connectivity, it's going to be of a different type of connection. For the Sabertooth series, they're not going to feature M.2 based connections. Okay. But the Mark I will feature SATA Express based connectivity. Okay. So you're going to have your classic SATA PCH. Of course, you're going to get dual front USB 3, which is going to be on both boards. So that's going to be great for users that want more USB 3 connectivity. But one point that I did also want to touch on from the power delivery section is with the Sabertooth power delivery components, we noted that they had those 10K rated capacitors, but we've also improved the inductors. For this generation, these are new fully molded alloy inductors, which also, if you look at the top of the inductor, you'll see that it has like the little ridges. And those little ridges are very similar to kind of the heatsink design for the inductors that we have on the WS.
There we go. Let's get a closer look at that. Yeah, I noticed those have a really distinct look to them.
Yes.
Along with the Tough series, they look very rugged and durable.
Yeah.
So is that a lifespan thing? Is that purely aesthetic? Is it a...
No, it's definitely not purely aesthetic. So it's a fully molded inductor, meaning it's not hollow, so we have higher amperage output capability, but we also receive better thermal performance. The actual inductor gets better thermal efficiency from it. So overall, that's just to go in line with all the tough components. So we have those tough inductors, tough chokes, tough MOSFETs, and tough capacitors. Those three things together, along, of course, with our great quality layout and topology design, help to give you that great power delivery section on the motherboard, so that regardless of whether you're running stock or overclock, you get great power efficiency. Okay. Moving back, though, to the storage array configuration, as you were noting, though, I still think that users are going to have more than enough connectivity for their baseline focus. What we tend to notice also on storage users is that they tend to not generally run extreme types of storage array configurations. They tend to usually default to about 3 to 4 base devices at most. Okay. So that's also the reason why we've gone with a little bit more simplified focus type of design connection. Although, as I noted, if we take a look at the Mark I does feature more expansive connectivity.
All right, so that being said, let's go ahead and bring the Mark I over here front and center. Now, this is the first time I've seen a couple different variations of the Sabertooth board with the new launch. So apart from the immediate distinction, that being that the Mark I here is coming with the thermal armor included, which means you have the molded plastic cover on the top, which not only protects the components, but also provides some unique airflow options up here at the top that I'm sure we're going to come back to in just a moment. But you also get the tough fortifier on the back, which I just think is really cool. Practically speaking, again, it is going to provide additional support, additional rigidity. It's going to help to keep the components that come through the back of the board a little bit more protected, but also...
But it will also actually reduce temperature. What we've done here, as you can see, is that it makes direct contact with the back VRM, so it actually does serve as a pull-through heatsink. So actually in our testing and analysis, it actually will help to improve thermal dissipation by performance between about 7 to 8 C from the VRM assembly heatsink. So not only, like you said, do you get the improved rigidity and minimize any torsion or flexing on the board, but you do actually get a passive heatsink. And we also are making sure to have the fortifier not be not cover the convection holes. So you'll see that there are certain holes that are here in the PCB, and those holes actually allow air to travel directly through the entirety of the motherboard, so that actually it cools the PCB layers as well. So that's another way that we're also helping to improve the cooling performance on the Tough series of boards.
And then one other little bonus is if you're doing an outside the box build, it actually sits really nicely on the table.
It definitely does.
That's just one of those little things that I've noticed before. Sorry, I'm giving Steve a hard time running the camera here. But all right, so the thermal armor as well as the Tough fortifier in the back, you get those. And would you be able to purchase these separately if you wanted to apply them to the
No, as for right now, we're actually not going to be selling the thermal armor independently for the actual, for the Mark II model. So the Mark I will be the only one that comes with it. Because in addition, there are other differences on the actual Mark I. So an example of that will be, as we introduced in the previous generation, we had these flow valves which allow you to control how airflow was essentially being guided through the entire thermal armor interface, right? But we also have two fans that for this generation actually have been further improved and enlarged. One of the key benefits that we're going to have is we're going to have the ability for the fan either here in the central portion of the thermal armor, as well as the fan that would also go here, which would be in line for the actual VRM heatsink area, to actually allow it to either intake or exhaust air out of the actual thermal armor design.
So after the fan's installed, you can actually reverse the speed on it without actually physically...
Correct, and that's all adjustable within the actual thermal armor software, which is of course part of AI Suite. So keeping in mind that of course we maintain all those same advanced fan controls that we talked about on the previous board are all still here, but even with more fan header connections, as well as with those supplemental fans to assist in cooling performance.
And I can speak from experience here, at least going back a couple generations with the Sabertooth Z97, I did some CPU overclocking testing to test some coolers, and I was running kind of a silly amount of voltage through the CPU specifically to make it much hotter, and by adding the fan here on the back, which I didn't have originally when I started the testing, was able to stabilize that overclock a bit more.
It does help, especially when you're running higher level of voltage through the system, like you said, you know, usually looking at maybe like 1.285 to 1.3 volts or greater. Just having additional airflow helps to improve overall thermal efficiency and power efficiency of your VRM components, especially the way that we even design the heat sinks on the board. The heat sinks on this board are a little bit different than the heat sinks that are on the Mark I, and that they're more of a pin-fin thermal, so very similar to WS. They're designed for the best kind of airflow being passed through them to get the best efficiency and stability. Now, one other upgrade that we're going to have here on the Mark I is, if we take a look here at the back I/O, is going to be that it has now dual NICs versus the Mark II has only a single Ethernet connection. So both boards feature Intel network controllers, but this one, the Mark I, features one Intel and one Realtek. But they both feature our TurboLAN software, which allow you to, of course, do packet priority control to be able to optimize your networking experience, whether you're gaming, whether you're downloading, browsing, whatever it might be, for not only those physical network controllers, but even if you add, let's say, a PCIe wireless card or a USB wireless adapter, the TurboLAN software would also complement that as well. So you have a great deal of flexibility for how you utilize that. Now, these boards also feature, of course, improvements like your USB Charger Plus, USB 3 Boost, as well as USB BIOS flashback. So you get a ton more functionality there, but I think just some of the last points that we want to be able to cover on are going to be some of the things that are going to be really, really hard to see on the board. So one of the things actually you're not going to be able to even see it here because it's covered by this board, but if we head back over to the Mark I, and we take a look at really closely here in this I/O section, there's small little surface-mounted ESD protection circuitry. Now, we've always had actually very advanced ESD circuitry on our motherboards. As a fact, actually, ASUS motherboards that feature 5X protection are already above the industry average in terms of their ESD discharge rate. And there's two forms of ESD discharge support. One is called contact charge, and the other is called air charge. And for tough, they actually significantly improve upon what's even offered on ASUS series motherboards. They even offer improved protection against that. And that's actually for all the connections on the board, whether it's the USB 2 ports, the USB 3 ports, the Ethernet connection. All of that is important. The reason being is that those areas are most susceptible to discharge when you go plugging in devices into them. And this is sometimes how either devices or ports themselves can be damaged. So this is us just looking more closely at the components and making sure that, once again, we're in line of making sure that when you buy a board such as the Tough, we're really trying to improve upon all those aspects for reliability and durability, in the same way that we've given you those dust defenders, right, where we introduced that in previous generations, where you can cover every single slot that pretty much you're not using. Why? So that things like dust, debris, dander can't get inside there to potentially short out those ports or cause damage to the contacts if you're not utilizing those connections.
Okay. And then since I brought up the next generation storage options, I did want to point out that you do have some SATA Express options available here on the Mark I.
Correct, and that would allow you to, of course, outside of the standard the standard PCH-based ports, you have those two SATA Express ports, and those two SATA Express ports, of course, if not used in SATA Express fashion, will allow you to go ahead and have 4 SATA 6G ports, or you can utilize 2 SATA Express-based devices, such as the Hyper Express little guy right there that I think you have, which is a great little accessory for users that are looking for a great way to access SATA Express connectivity. They can go ahead and just take, 2 M.2 SSDs or 2 mSATA-based SSDs, pop it in there, and then connect it, and you'll be able to take advantage of SATA Express performance.
Excellent. That's just giving you guys a little early adopters bump, because the SATA Express drives are still fairly limited, if you can find them at all. Actually, most of you can't find them at all right now. But you can do it with that particular device.
So I think rounding things out, we've talked about I think a lot of the really great features that we've introduced, and there's even more that we offer as part of the ASUS series of boards. But just a couple I think are really cool ones to keep in mind that are part of our software package are going to be aspects like, one, our push notice function, which is great for guys that want to be able to do monitoring on their system. They can go ahead and receive alerts for either temperatures, voltages, or fan speeds. If something goes wrong, whether they're in their internet local home connection, or whether they're on an extranet connection with like Wi-Fi or 3G or 4G, they can receive a notice on their smart device letting them know that there's an issue. And with the new improvements that we've made to remote desktop, you could even remote into your system and then shut down your system if needed under that situation. We also have a great program called Media Streamer, which will allow you to go ahead and stream your music, movies, or images, whether in an intranet or an extranet-based environment, to your mobile device, as well as lastly Home Cloud, which is a great program to allow you to mount your C drive directly into a cloud-based environment, but you don't have to upload any files to it. It's essentially just immediately available to you in the cloud, so that you can go ahead and access it either in your intranet or extranet environment, share or manage files, as well as even stream content as well. So when you tie that in together with, of course, the flexibility for these other accessories that we have here, such as our Thunderbolt EX2 card, the NFC Express box, or the Qi wireless charging, you have a whole degree of flexibility that, regardless of whether you're building for a gaming system, content creation system, general productivity system, whatever it might be, the Tough really, I think, stands behind giving you a great board that's going to be reliable, stable, and have a great deal of component quality really centered towards giving you that best long-term build experience. Excellent.
And I do think there is one element or aspect here that we've skipped over so far, and that is that if you want to build a military-themed system, there's just no better way to go than with the Tough Series board. And if you guys didn't already notice, the thermal armor on this new Mark I here is slightly different. It's a bit more of a graphite finish.
Yes.
Just speaking to the aesthetics, but I think it looks really cool. As you can see, it's got a bit more of a gray sheen than kind of the mostly black that we've seen in the past.
We had like a black and brown kind of vibe for the previous generations. I think for this one, we brought it in to be a little bit more in line, kind of have like a newer kind of aesthetic. And if actually you've seen some of the new military fatigue colors, they actually go to like what's referred to as like a digital camo, which actually incorporates more grays.
Nice.
And that's part of kind of us evolving the color aesthetic into that.
Yeah, but it looks really cool, and if you're into aesthetics, which you may or may not be if you're looking at a Tough Series board, but if you are, I think it has a really, really cool look overall, especially with the thermal armor included there. But that's all for this video, guys. Of course, check out the video links in this video's description if you want to check out these boards on Newegg.com. Again, the ASUS TUF Series Z97 Sabertooth, the Mark I and the Mark II that we've seen here. Also the Z97 Griffin. If you're looking for a micro ATX trim, that's going to be available as well. JJ, thanks again for stopping by today.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to you guys for watching. Don't forget to leave us a comment in the comment section below. Let us know what you think of the slightly modified new color scheme on these particular motherboards. Don't forget to hit the like button while you're down there, and we'll see you next time.